Hello fellow orchid lovers. So I just wanted to do a brief update video on my Cattleya, and then also I really wanted to talk about water culture and growing orchids, and how some people may feel that that just means a certain thing with a certain type of orchid. For instance, I have a Cattleya that's 2 days wet, 5 days dry. I have a Phalaenopsis that's full water culture, so that's 7 days wet. I have an Oncidium, again, 7 days in water, and that's not the case. So I just wanted to discuss that a little bit. Olivia recently did a video on this as well, how she has adjusted her water culture, and I thought it was just a really brilliant idea to share that. So I also wanted to kind of share my experiences and where I've had to make adjustments as well. Just wanted to also share that this bloom is still showing no signs of fading. It's been open since July 3rd. It still smells fragrant. Loving, loving, loving this Cattleya. It's lasting a really long time. Also, my Brassivola nodosa recently bloomed. And I know some people have trouble getting a scent from her. And I did a little experiment. We have a dimmer on our kitchen light, which is where she lives, in our kitchen on our brightest window. And we typically leave the dimmer on its lowest setting. And I found that she had no scent when we were doing that. However, one night, made it completely dark in here. There's no street lights, so it was dark. And then the scent came. And it smells like a combination of vanilla and artificial lemon. So it kind of smells like a lemon vanilla cookie, which is it's really pretty. And I just love this flower. It's kind of shaped like a heart a little bit if you open this up all the way. It's kind of shaped like a heart, and she's got beautiful purple spotting in a green throat. So I love her. And then she was three plants, if you'll remember. The newest growth on her, on the little guy, look at that in the front there. Look at those beautiful new roots coming out on her. Oops. So she's doing really good. So this conversation about water culture, really any method that you grow your orchids in, whether it be water culture, ceramis, bark, sphagnum moss, whatever your choices are for growing your orchids, you can't apply hard and fast rules to orchids. You can't just say, you know, this is the type of orchid I have and this is what I'm going to do with it. You really have to watch your plants. For instance, Oncidium types, common knowledge, you have to keep them moist. They don't like to dry out. So my Sherry Baby, I found the best method for making that possible is I put the glass beads in the bottom. I fill the water up to here, so it's just touching her roots. She drinks it. The water goes down, but she's still getting humidity from the water. And there's only a limited time that her roots are exposed to the water directly. And so that slows down any root rot that the water might cause. And it keeps the plant hydrated, and she's happy. Her pseudobulbs are plump. Her spike is still happy and growing, growing, growing. So that works for her. Another Oncidium type. This is my Sweet Sugar. Not happy. I was keeping her roots in full water culture. She's not happy. Her pseudobulbs are all desiccating. And so I've decided to do the same thing as with the Sherry Baby. Only, instead of putting her roots in the water, I'm keeping the water covering the glass beads and just barely touching the bottom of the roots. And I'm going to see if that helps. This root has already turned green. So I know it's getting some water. Hopefully that pseudobulb will plump up. I'm learning. This is what we do. We get our plants, we apply what we know about them, and we allow them to teach us what their real needs are. And that's how you have to approach full water culture semi-water culture, growing in bark, growing in ceramis. Each plant is different. We move over here. This is my Maxillaria tenuifolia. I was concerned because these sheaths also absorb water and they were getting wet, that she was going to start to have a rotting problem. So I decided to switch her over to semi-water culture. And when I say semi-water culture, I don't mean that every instance of semi-water culture is 2 days wet and 5 days dry. In this instance, I was doing 5 days wet and 2 days dry. And she was not happy. All these green growing tips that you see, she had some green growing tips, and they all turned black when I took her out of full water culture. She has to stay, her stem has to stay wet 7 days a week, otherwise her roots die back. I keep her in water all the time. And that's the result. She's happy. I have 2 orchids here. This is my Cattleya that had no roots, or had roots but they were pretty much dead. And then this is my Phalaenopsis that lost all its roots, and I've been struggling for months to save it. I am convinced that the only thing that has saved these orchids is water culture, applied properly for what this particular orchid's needs are. Look at that, she's putting out a side growth. This orchid was in terrible shape. The pseudobulbs were so thin, you turn them sideways and they disappear. And look at that, there's a new growth. This Phalaenopsis has had no roots for months, and now look at that. Finally, roots. If this orchid had been in bark, I really feel there is no way I would have been able to keep this orchid hydrated. Maybe if I had put it in moss, I would have been able to keep it hydrated, but I wouldn't have been able to see the progress. I wouldn't have been able to see when it really needed water. So I really feel like this method works for me only because I'm taking my cue from each individual orchid. I'm not saying I have a Phalaenopsis, full water culture for you. No, that's not the case. Some of my Phalaenopsis like to be in water all the time. Some of my Phalaenopsis like semi-water culture. For instance, this Phalaenopsis. I've had this Phalaenopsis for almost 3 months now. She was the one with the gorgeous roots. Now look at her. I decided to try semi-water culture. I decided to try to do her 5 days wet and 2 days dry. She has objected very strongly. She is dumping her roots. She is not happy. Then you have this orchid. This is a Phalaenopsis too. Loves semi-water culture. Was fine with full water culture, but loves semi-water culture. Those roots are so healthy and happy. She has not objected to being dry for 2 days. So that's her. Same type of orchid, Phalaenopsis, Phalaenopsis. This one doesn't like to dry out. This one does. This is another Phalaenopsis that does not like to dry out. I'd been keeping her in water because she's one of my ICUs, and I decided, you know what, I don't want these roots to rot. Let me take her out for a day. Bad move. Her roots shriveled up immediately, and I think I may have lost them. They were perfectly healthy, firm roots, and now I may have killed those roots. So we have some failures. We have some learning experiences. This is how we understand what our orchids need. Does that mean this orchid's going to die? No. We just have to grow new roots on her. And it may mean that we're going to have to try the method that worked with this orchid. And it may take months. She may be severely set back, or she may bounce back quickly. We'll have to learn what she wants. Speaking of failures, I've killed 2 orchids so far since I started being successful back in March. And I may be killing this one too. My mini phal died and my Miltoniopsis died. This is a Miltonia. Not happy. Leaves are turning yellow. New growth has stopped growing. Not a happy orchid. The pseudobulbs are still plump, but she's not happy. And if I don't figure out what she wants, she's gonna die. So there may be certain types of orchids that I'm just not experienced enough for yet, or that my environment, I can't grow them, or that they don't like water culture and it will kill them. There are so many possibilities. Look at your orchids, see what they're doing. Don't just blindly say, okay, I'm gonna do semi-water culture, that means I'm gonna keep them wet for 2 days, dry for 5, and think that that's just gonna work across the board. Most of your orchids will be tolerant of that. Like my Cattleya forest, they are fine. Some of them are growing roots quicker than others. Some of them haven't grown roots since I got them. But they are all still healthy plants with nice fat pseudobulbs. So I'm keeping my eyes on my orchids, and if they're gonna tell me what they want, they're gonna get that. For instance, these Cattleyas, these are my little Cattleyas. This one, new roots, loving it. This one, new roots, loving it. This one, beautiful. Best new roots on any of my Cattleyas. Green, happy roots. This one, same size, same type, not happy. I haven't figured out what works for her 100% yet. Is she dead? Is she dying? No. Pseudobulbs are plump. She's still hydrating. But I have to figure out what works for her. And I will do that. But I won't do that if I don't pay attention. If I just apply blindly a rule about growing orchids. Each plant is different. Another for instance. Bring you back over here. My Vanda. Got this Vanda. Roots were in terrible shape. Put her in full water culture. She started to develop a spike. I was worried her roots were gonna rot. I took her out of full water culture. I put her in semi-water culture. So I was letting her roots dry for a couple of days. She lost her spike. Her spike dried up. So clearly I wasn't giving her what she needed. So she went back into full water culture. However, I have again adjusted that. I take her out of water for less than 24 hours. So I take the water out and I let her roots dry a little and look. But for no more than 24 hours. And if I go away on vacation, she stays in full water culture, however many days I'm gone. And she's happy. She's growing new roots, green growing tips. Her aerial roots, green growing tips. She's healthy. Her new leaves continue to grow. She's happy this way. But I had to learn what she wanted. This orchid, I haven't shown you this one before. This is Rhynchostylus gigantea. I got her in terrible root shape. All those brown roots, that's the only thing she had, was these gnarly old brown roots. Literally, I put her in water culture, and not even a day later, boom, all these roots started popping out of everywhere. Green growing tips everywhere. Out of the old roots, she started popping out new roots. She loves full water culture. She does not like to dry out. So again, you have to realize you can't apply a hard and fast rule to every single orchid. You have to figure out what works for them. I have my Tolumnias up here. I have to make sure that they're staying moist, but they also shouldn't stay too moist. So that's a fine balance. So I put a little bit of water in the bottom that their roots just barely touch, and within a day it's evaporated, and there's still a little water, but the roots aren't touching them anymore, and that seems to work for them. They enjoy a little bit of water and then humidity, and then I refill the water again. Each orchid, even though it's part of a type, has its own requirements for growing. Just because it's a Brassivola doesn't mean one specific thing. Just because it's an Oncidium doesn't mean one specific thing. You have to watch your plants, and you have to figure out what works for your plants. If you're in a more humid environment, you have to take that into consideration. If you're in a more arid environment, that as well. Is your house cool? Is your house hot? What does your orchid need? Just because it's a certain type of orchid does not mean that it's going to need the same thing that every other type in that type of orchid is going to need. Just because it's a Cattleya doesn't mean that it's going to need the same thing that all your other Cattleyas need. It may need to soak an extra day. Or, I have one Cattleya, her roots stay damp all the way through the 5 days that she's supposed to be drying out. I'm not treating her any differently than my other ones, but now I'm going to have to adjust that because she needs to dry out before I water her again. I don't want her roots to rot. So you really need to pay attention and not apply a hard and fast rule to your orchids. That's why taking notes is so important. If you really want your orchids to succeed, you need to know what your orchids need and not just say, I have a Cattleya, I have an Oncidium, I have a Phalaenopsis. I'm going to apply the same rule to every type of orchid in that particular type. You have to look at each individual plant and find out what they need. So I hope that that's been helpful. I hope that all of you are learning from your orchids and really doing well. It's such a great, rewarding hobby to have, especially when we have new growths and blooms. It's so exciting. I get childish and clap my hands. And I just love it. Like I've said in past videos, I love orchids and I have wanted to be successful for years and I've killed so many of them. And now finally, I'm learning about how to grow these beautiful, beautiful plants. And again, I've made mistakes. Even since I started to be successful, I've made mistakes. I've killed a few, but I've learned from those mistakes. And I will continue to learn from my mistakes. And I may continue to kill a few. I don't know, this sweet sugar, she may not make it. I may never learn what it is that she wants. Obviously, I have a problem with Phalaenopsis and Miltonias. I killed one and I'm working on killing a second one. So I have not figured out what I can do for those plants to keep them alive yet. But instead of applying a hard and fast rule, I'm learning what each individual orchid needs. And that means that I've had to limit my collection. I meant to count how many orchids I had before I started making this video, but I forgot. So I'll put it in the description. I've had to limit my collection. I've had to stop buying at this point because I'm at the point where in order to care for my orchids properly, I have to limit their number. I have other things going on in my life. I have animals that I have to take care of. I have a job that I have to do. And so I have to limit how many orchids I can have to make sure I take care of them properly. And again, that doesn't mean I'm not going to continue to make mistakes, but I hope that I learn from those mistakes. Now I know this orchid doesn't like to dry out. She likes to stay wet. Hopefully, she won't dump any more of her roots, but maybe she will. Again, I'll learn from that. So if you have any questions, please let me know. If you have any feedback, please let me know. If you have any pointers, please let me know. Like I said, I'm relatively new to this. I am having success, but I am relatively new to this. And so I really enjoy watching other people's videos. Most of the people that I follow are not people that grow in water culture. They are people that grow in media. And yet I still learn from them. I still get some really good pointers. And I really appreciate everyone sharing their experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, because that's how we learn from each other. And sometimes we'll try someone's method and it just won't work, and that's okay. It's okay if something that someone else is doing is not going to work for us. And that doesn't mean what they're doing is wrong. It just means it works for them, but not for you. And that's okay. We just need to learn from it. So I hope you all continue to have happy growing, and I will talk to you all next time.